Hi everyone, we're talking about the Diataxis documentation framework today. The reason is that I just joined a startup and I've been doing documentation. And when I first joined, I had no idea what I should actually start working on first to make it flow better. Bearing in mind, the documentation hadn't really had a lot of love put into it yet. So it was difficult. But then I remembered Matt from Replit had told me about the Diataxis documentation framework, and genuinely really helped. I feel like the structure is way better for our documentation now, and it's just so much clearer to me about where things should go, what kind of content should exist. So we're diving deep into it in this episode. Enjoy.
If you're sitting there, thinking about how do I write docs for my product, or maybe you're writing docs yourself for your developer, this is a great framework to think about how to divide up documentation, how to organize it in a way that's useful, but also discoverable and navigable for your users. It's a really good way to be able to kind of go out there and show people that you care, or to prove that you can create high quality experiences for developers.
So in this episode, I wanted to dig into what is Diataxis and look at what people have been saying about Diataxis, kind of talk through some of the Hacker News threads, look at some examples of a company that has been using Diataxis, and then also talk about my experience in the first week of trying to implement Diataxis and some of the things that I've learned. I hope this will be interesting to you. Please let me know, because, I will still carry on to do a lot of the interview formats, but, I just want to solve my own problem here, and I want to learn about Diataxis. And so I wanted to do an episode that I hope will be helpful to you guys as well. That's how I think about scaling DevTools, by the way, is what is useful to me. And that's why I'm trying as well to put myself more into the position. Okay, so let's take a look at what is Diataxis. So Diataxis markets itself, I should say markets, it's a free project. The founder of Diataxis is Daniele Procida. He's a core developer on Django, of course. Anyway, so Daniele, awesome guy, clearly. And he has written a systematic approach to technical documentation authoring. Okay, so let's get into it. Diataxis says that there's like 4 types of content in your docs. There are tutorials, how-to guides, explanation, reference. Okay, I'm going to start with the easiest one. Reference is the stuff that, you already know what that is. That's like the, if you go like your API reference docs, your SDK references, just saying exactly how it is, right? There's explanations, also quite straightforward, where it's like, if you've got, so I'm working at Layercode, and if we want to explain how do voice AI pipelines work in general, and like what are the things that could matter, and it's not really it's not solving a specific problem, but more just helping you learn. Those ones are easy, right? These are the 2 that get people tripped up. There's tutorials, and then there's how-to guides. And honestly, I kind of thought that was the same thing. If I heard tutorial, I'd think that's a how-to. What's the difference? So I'll let Daniele explain the difference between the 2, as well as how each quadrant relates to each other.
Now, a tutorial is a lesson that takes the reader by the hand through a series of practical steps to realize a project or complete a meaningful exercise. The only way one learns a new skill is by doing. Tutorials are learning oriented. Your task in creating a tutorial is to create a learning experience, one in which the pupil learns by doing things under your direction. Your tutorial must be repeatable, must instill confidence, must result in success every time for every learner. It must be concrete and particular. Next, how-to guides. A how-to guide takes the reader through the steps required to complete a specific task. How-to guides are recipes. How-to guides are task-oriented or problem-oriented. It serves not the beginner, but the already competent user. It responds to a question: how do I do such and such, with a series of actions, and only actions, without digressions or explanations or attempts to teach. Tutorials and how-to guides are similar because they're both concerned with describing practical steps. How-to guides and reference share with each other that they both serve our work. They are what we need when we're actually working. Reference and explanation are similar because they're both concerned with theoretical knowledge. Explanations and tutorials have an affinity because both serve our study of the subject.
So let's go swiftly onwards to reference. Reference guides contain the technical description, facts that a user needs in order to do things correctly. It's facts, basically, in the references. Okay, so like a how-to guide, reference documentation serves the user who is at work, and it's up to the user to be sufficiently competent to interpret and use it correctly. So don't mix facts with like your sales pitch or your explanation of the big world of your dev tool. You just tell them, do this, do this, do this, because they're there to do work and they're using it as a reference. Okay, so then we have explanation. So explanation, explanatory guides provide context and background. They serve the need to understand and put things in a big picture. Explanation joins things together and helps answer the question, why?
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. WorkOS helps you get enterprise ready. That means they give you all the things that you need to start working with enterprises. Things like audit trails, skim provisioning, role-based access control, and single sign-on. Let's hear from Utpal from Digger.dev, a dev tool using WorkOS.
We haven't had to think about auth at all. I think support is great. We have a Slack Connect channel with them. Issues, if any, there haven't been many, but anytime there have been issues, it's been addressed super quickly. So audit trail, SSO, stuff like that, we don't think about that anymore. Genuinely, we don't think about that anymore. And you don't necessarily think about these enterprise features, but they still lead to revenue. And it kind of is a no-brainer in that sense.
WorkOS helps your dev tool start selling to enterprises much faster. And they're trusted by dev tools like Cursor, Fal, and Vercel. If you use their user management auth, you can get your first 1 million monthly active users completely free.
Explanation often needs to circle around its subject and approach it from different directions. It can contain opinions and take perspectives. So WorkOS might explain why the biggest reason that startups fail is because they fail to cross the enterprise chasm because they don't have enterprise features, and why this is important, and why big companies care about role-based access control, and all these things that me as someone that's never worked at a big company, I don't know why they care about that. That's new to me. And also WorkOS have this opinion that they believe the big reason startups fail is because of not crossing the enterprise chasm, but someone else might disagree. So that would have no place in the references, right? But as an explanation, it's interesting, and it could still help you understand their product more. So let's have a look at an example of someone who did a really good job with documentation called Sequin. Again, I'm going to talk this through. This is better on video if you do have it. Spotify has it on video, YouTube, but I'm going to talk through it as well. So hopefully it's still good over audio. So I'm on this website called Sequin, and I found them on Hacker News, and they said, this was 8 months ago, we just applied this framework to the Sequin docs 2 weeks ago. It has felt so nice to have a framework. I think our docs flow really well now, and it's been easier for us to add and maintain docs because we know where to put things. Oh my God, 100% by the way, that was my biggest takeaway from Diataxis. The slightly ironic part is the Diataxis docs themselves are a bit obtuse. Daniele, sorry. It's a little verbose, so it took a couple passes for it all to click. The analogy I give my team that was helpful for everyone's understanding. Imagine you're shopping for a piece of cooking equipment, like a pressure cooker. The first thing you're going to look at is the quick start, the tutorial. How does this thing work generally? You just want to see it go from A to B. Then you're going to wonder how to use it to cook a particular dish that you like. That's a how-to. If you're really curious about anything you've seen so far, then you'll flip to the reference to read more about it. For example, you might check the exact minutes needed for different types of beans. See, I actually think that you might do that if you start to go off-piste and start to do, I kind of want to like follow this how-to, but maybe I want to do something extra. How might I do that? Rather than just as an interest, but that's my only like nitpick here with how I would interpret it, but I could be wrong here. Anyway, and finally, when you're really invested in pressure cooking and want to understand the science behind it, why pressure affects cooking times, how the safety mechanisms work, etc. That's when you'll read the explanatory content. Comically, our docs were completely backwards. We lead with explanation, how Sequin works. I think that's the natural impulse of an engineer. Let me tell you how this thing works and why we built it this way so you can develop a mental model, then you'll surely get it, right? While that may be technically accurate, a person doesn't have the time or patience for that. You need to ramp them into your world. The quick start, then the how-to, then the reference flow is a great way to do that. Then if you really have their attention, you can galvanize them about your approach with explanatory material. Okay, so then let's take a look. So how Sequin have structured things is on the left-hand panel, they have a section called Getting Started, and they have what is Sequin, interestingly. But then they also do have quick starts, and they have running Sequin, connect Postgres, set up CDC sync. I should say what Sequin is, by the way, just because we're going into their docs. Discover how to use Sequin to build real-time Postgres change data capture pipelines, which sounds very useful. So they have a get started section where they have quick starts, and they have quick starts for different, I guess, streams of data that you're going to get. So like Redis and TypeSense and Kafka. And then they have like a kind of nice little quick start on how to do that. So all of these at the top is like, seems to very much be like tutorials, like getting started tutorials. And then they've got Sequin managed. So it seems to be interesting stuff. I don't really know how that fits in. I guess this is maybe more of a explainer on what they do and how they run on AWS. It's kind of like a product almost, explaining what they offer. And then below that, they have setup guides. So AWS Kinesis, how to stream Postgres to AWS Kinesis. Okay, no, they have a section called How To Guides. This is easier. So they have how to deploy to production. So that must have also previously been a tutorial, but they have one, how to deploy to production. Learn how to use Sequin's CLI for version-controlled consistent deployments across environments. Test with Sequin, create audit logs with Sequin, annotate changes with how to annotate database changes. Okay, so they're much more to the point. All right. So Diataxis, let's go back and just do like a kind of another map of how Diataxis works. So if the content informs action and serves the user's acquisition of a skill, then it must belong to a tutorial. They have 4 of these, by the way. So that's the first one. Then we have if the content informs action, so just like a tutorial, and serves the user's application of a skill, not acquisition of a skill, application of its skill, then it must belong to a how-to guide. If the content informs cognition and serves the user's application of a skill, similarly application of a skill, then it belongs to reference. If the content informs cognition and serves the user's acquisition of skill, like a tutorial, not like a how-to guide or a reference, then it must belong to explanation. So one of the things that I found was like useful about Diataxis is they say like, don't try to just implement it all together. So they say there's this very simple workflow for Diataxis. Consider what you see in the documentation in front of you right now, which might be literally nothing if you haven't started yet. Ask, is there any way in which it could be improved? Decide on one thing you could do right now, however small, that would improve it, and do that thing, and then repeat. That's it. Do what you like. You can do what you like with Diataxis. You don't have to believe in it, and there is no exam. It is a wholly pragmatic approach. I think it's true, but what matters is that it actually helps people create better documentation. If you find that one idea or insight in that seems to be worthwhile, help yourself to that. There is an extensively elaborated theory around Diataxis, but you don't need to subscribe to it or even read about it. Diataxis doesn't require a commitment to pursue it to a final end. You can just do one thing right now. And even if you do nothing else ever after, you will at least have made that one improvement. In practice, what you'll find is that each thing you do will give you a clue as to the next thing you do. You only need to keep doing them. At this point, you have read everything you need to do to get started with Diataxis. You can read more if you want, and eventually you probably should, but you will get the most value from the guidance in this website when you turn to it with a problem or a question. Then that's when it comes alive. So I started to try to do this. So if I go to like docs.layercode.com this week, these are very much work in progress. And I just decided to like totally lift the columns to be exactly what Diataxis says. So I have one section on the left that's got start here and it's just getting started, because I think I want to have like one place where people come and, eventually it'll get more complicated, but I want them to look. This is the first time they're looking at it, to look here. And I want there to be a very, very quick way to do it. Right now, there's a pretty long tutorial that I want to cut down. And I want it to just be a CLI command that you just get started and then you see how it works. So this will be like a tutorial, quick start. But then I go straight to Diataxis stuff. So I have 4 more columns. So I have a start here, the first one, and then 4 more tutorials, how-to guides, reference, and I guess references, it should be probably, and explanations. I only did it this week. And so tutorials, I've got stuff like get started with Next.js, get started with Hono, get started with Fast API. And I actually didn't write any of these. I just renamed them and moved them. And luckily our docs aren't really indexed by Google yet. So I could just move all these things without worrying too much about redirects and everything. And then I have how-to guides. So right now I haven't got that many. We've got integrating Layercode with Twilio, and it's very, very short. And it just says this guide walks you through it, which you probably don't even need to go, but it's just stuff like go to Layercode dashboard, open the client settings, enable Twilio phone calls, and then save changes. Go to Layercode. Number 3, go to Layercode settings, add the Twilio SID and auth token, and save. And so it's like very much like we have some other stuff like deployments, create a tunnel for webhooks. And then we have reference, we have API reference, SDKs reference, and explanations, which is stuff like how Layercode works. And I want like turn taking, how turn taking works in voice AI, that sort of stuff. Yeah, before it was just like we had like a section on like front end, back end, like telephony, stuff like that. It was just like, I think this is a little bit clearer. I quite like it so far. So that's what I've been doing. So I don't think Diataxis is like a panacea. So I want to also like just throw some kind of like what people are saying. So I'm just going to go through some Hacker News comments to give you a bit of extra feedback on it. Okay, someone else said, I'm a technical writer. Diataxis is similar to Dita. On the other hand, systems like this might miss out on what users actually need. Diataxis might work for a long time if technical documentation is only used in a documentation platform. However, if the same information could and should be used in more than one place, for example, in a UI, in a documentation portal, and in a mobile app, there might be need to break up information into smaller pieces in order to assemble them in different ways. This is known as content reuse, the practice of using the same content in multiple places. If there's resources and time, I always recommend to do UX research at the very start of a project so that one doesn't feel later choked by several severely restricted information model. And then some people are disagreeing that it's similar to Dita, blah, blah, blah. And someone else said it's very popular in tech writing circles and pretty standard now, as others have suggested. We do see people try to take it too far though, and have literally only these 4 categories on their docs pages, which never works well, in my opinion. It's mainly useful for a writer to keep in mind stuff like it's a guide, so focus on getting a result, not teaching. And then someone else was like, only for many projects, having a medium quality version of just one of those would have been an improvement. There's lots of hacker news arguments there. Okay, someone says, Diataxis is a great way to structure documentation, but I think its real value is in simplifying how we think about writing docs. It shifts the focus from trying to cram everything into one perfect document to recognizing that different users have different needs. Like tutorials are for learning by doing, guides are for solving specific problems, references for quick lookups, and explanations dive into the why. That clarity alone can make one write useful docs. That being said, sticking too rigidly to any system could be a trap. I actually really like this comment. I think this is like maybe that's the best way to explain it. Like tutorials are for learning by doing, guides are for solving specific problems, references for quick lookups, and explanations dive into the why. It shifts the focus from trying to cram everything into the one perfect document to recognizing that different users have different needs. Love it. I think that's a great way to actually explain it. I read this and I think this might have been the one that made it click for me. Okay, so someone else is saying like they like the idea of it and they've met Daniele at PyCon UK. He's talented, a very friendly chap, but they have reservations about this being this rigid about the differentiating between the various areas of documentation in this way. During a sprint, I was told that the docs I was preparing, not by Daniele for the record, but mixing modalities are not acceptable because of this. Not pulling rank, but I've been a teacher for 20 plus years and I have a reasonable idea of how to explain things and how to scaffold learning. But they say as long as there's not total rigidity, then this is a great tool for deciding how to produce documentation. Yeah, so I mean, I'm a big fan of Diataxis and I'm using it to build documentation for Logdy. I'm curious how people see it and whether it's useful to build documentation. Okay, let's have a quick look at Logdy. I recognize Diataxis. They've got introduction, they've got tutorial, and they've got explanation, and they've got reference. Where is how-to guides? Where are the how-to guides, Logdy? But everyone's got at the top, what is Logdy? Is that the first one you get to? Quick start. See, I think this is better than what Sequin had, even though I think this is great. But I think you should, I feel like they said that starting with the quick start is the way to go. But they start with what is Logdy. So I'm very curious to hear if they change their mind. Anyway, what Logdy is a web-based platform to help monitor, track, and analyze application logs in real time locally. So they have tutorials, Docker logs. What's going on here? Docker logs, web UI. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Huh. I don't like the way that disappears. Anyway, the sidebar disappears when I click on it. So they have explanation, following logs, command modes, loading logs, traces, visualization. Okay, so anyway, check out Logdy. I'm going to put a link in there as well. But they seem to like it. Okay, so I think that's all I'm going to cover here. I have actually invited the guy from Sequin onto the show. Let's see if he comes on. Logdy as well, if you're up for it. Or anyone else that's introduced Diataxis and has strong opinions. I'd love to talk to you about how you've done your documentation. I hope this is helpful. Please let me know. I do want scaling dev tools to be useful. It's not really entertainment. It is like something that I hope will help you build a better dev tool, and I hope will help me build better dev tools as well. So let me know and see you soon. Also, Matt from Replit shared a ton of good, interesting ideas around creating educational content that really works for developers. So if you haven't listened to the episode I did with him, go check it out.